have Leah Puccio. Is that how you pronounce that? Okay, great. President of Tabor AI. Tabor AI. Tabor AI. Thank you. Sam Warmuth, who's next to me, Chief Product Officer of Healthvana, and Sayandeep Sarkar, who's the head of product at SkyPoint. So welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Yes, and you're going to get a chance to introduce what you do here. Maybe with the first question, which is going to mirror the first panel, really, because we are in a regulated industry, and it is hard to get started in such a highly regulated industry in healthcare, where you have HIPAA compliance in a lot of, obviously, life and death situations you have to take seriously, so you can't hallucinate on healthcare prescriptions without doing some serious damage, right? So can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing as the biggest opportunities in your areas? Maybe I was going to suggest starting with you, Leah, and Sam, because you're on the front end of offering that solution, SkyPoint. I want to come to you, Sayandeep, too, because you're offering a number of other clients' services in healthcare. But maybe Leah?
Sure.
Tell us what you do first.
Sure. So Tabor AI, we are an organization that has a platform that works to demystify Medicare for seniors and really looking to simplify the Medicare enrollment process so that every aging senior has access to healthcare coverage that meets their unique needs. And right now, the way that we think about it is we're using AI. And if you think about healthcare, right now, one of the biggest challenges that we have is navigating and managing massive amounts of fragmented and complex data. And so when you think about Medicare, that data that's needed to enroll a patient or a senior onto Medicare is located and fragmented in many different ways. And so what Tabor does is we work to unify all of that data into a single system, and then be able to power that with reasoning and intelligence to be able to allow Medicare agents an easy way for them to answer in real time questions for the beneficiary, deliver them a more personalized experience, but more importantly, to make sure that we remove some of that agent bias in what contracts they understand more and what contracts that they may not understand, so that they have a full picture of what would actually be the best Medicare plan for that beneficiary. And then they can work with that beneficiary to enroll them into coverage that best meets their needs.
Leah, great. I changed my mind, Sam. I just want to go to Sayandeep first because you represent a number of clients that look like Leah, right? Companies similar to what she's doing. So she referred to intelligence. She used synthesizing from a ton of data. Is that the main application area that most of your clients are using? Can you talk a little bit about SkyPoint and the clients that you're serving and what they need Gen AI for?
Sure. Can everyone hear me all right? Yeah. Great. So SkyPoint is a generic platform for the Tabor use case that Leah talked about. In the SkyPoint platform, you get all the data that you have, your structured data in databases, your Excel sheets, etc., and your unstructured PDFs, text files. Get all of that in, and then just start talking to that in natural language. This includes API calls, Bing searches, everything around that. Now, we operate in healthcare, and as you talked about, just the hallucination of models is something that you really need to figure out. You can't have hallucinations when someone's asking a question about a patient. So the philosophy that we lean towards right now is what I think Chet also mentioned in one of the slides, which is generative AI at the edges of development. So instead of relying on one model to do everything or orchestrate the entire workflow, what we do is we use it sort of like a programming tool, like a switch statement or a loop, wherein we tell a model, hey, why don't you plan this out for me? Get back a response, and then the code does the rest of the job. Then we have a model that talks to a vector database, gets back responses, and then similarly the code does the rest of the job. So that's how we try to reduce hallucinations in our model. The upside of that, another upside is it's also very fast. You're not relying on a big model to do a lot of computation. You just have your code do a bunch of the things, and you can also parallelize a lot of the stuff because all of it is in code.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And Sam, can you talk a little bit about Healthvana? I mean, my understanding, just a quick provocation, is that you are still the largest distribution of OpenAI?
Patient-facing
Patient-facing
healthcare,
and healthcare, right? So tell us a little bit about that opportunity that you see.
Yeah, I really love being on the panel with Tabor and SkyPoint because I think, as the other speakers were talking about, there's a lot of back office and front office. And I think Tabor and SkyPoint are really looking at that back office, which I think is an enormous opportunity. I think it's going, right, if you think of, 2009 with high tech saying, okay, we need to go from paper charts in filing cabinets and everything is paper to digital, which it's still not done yet, but we're getting close. Being able to take that industry and make that sort of, it's almost the same transition, like from paper to digital to AI, I think is actually going to be significantly larger than that transition. It's going to unlock a whole bunch of new workflows. So on that other end of the front of house, that's what Healthvana does. So we're a digital patient engagement platform. Just a lot of words, but basically we're the digital experience for patients. We are B2B2C, so we have customers who have patients. We've delivered more than 60 million health records to patients. If you live in California, you might have heard of Healthvana. We have delivered COVID results for Los Angeles County, New York City School District, Miami, and then we've continued to move into many other areas since then. But what we really have focused on with our AI is looking at the problems that we see day to day. So we've delivered 60 million results. We also have handled and facilitated more than 1 million patient support requests. So messages coming in inbox, email, et cetera. So that is really the source of both problem and where we see AI solving that. So as Matt mentioned, we have, as far as we're aware, the largest live to patients response. So if you are a patient using Healthvana, you can directly talk to our AI agent. Again, it's not one-to-one. It's not just a ChatGPT wrapper. It is an orchestrated agentic AI, which we can get into maybe a little later. But really this idea that the healthcare industry, like many industries, but worse, has a staffing problem. This is not about replacing front desk workers or customer success management. It really is trying to supercharge, making those staff more effective because right now they're all overworked. So we've been able to, right now we have over 60,000 patients in our early access program opt in, and we'll be at over 1 million patients using it before the end of the year.
Great. Thanks, Sam. Want to go into the compliance side of things. What are you seeing and we could take it in any order, but what are you seeing is the greatest challenge when it comes to using AI and the things that are slowing you down, right? Needing to comply with HIPAA or other regulations? Liam.
Sure. So I think one of the things that we're finding challenging and is a reason why we've partnered with SkyPoint is there's not a lot of managed services out there that allow for the elasticity of scale. And so when you think about an organization like Tabor and you think about the Medicare process with open enrollment, right? That's a heavy time where we need to ingest a large amount of data, once a year, follow that up monthly, and then also be able to manage an increase in user activity during certain periods of time of the year. And so with, things like OpenAI, they just don't allow for that. And so we've been able to get that by utilizing the SkyPoint platform. And then, of course, on the back end, everything is HITRUST certified, SOC 2, and really aligning with the regulations that are mandated on and are, best for patient outcomes.
Super. Sandeep, do you want to go a step deeper? She mentioned she can't use OpenAI. What models do you use? I think you use a mix. Can you just briefly touch on that, and what are the compliance issues you're facing?
Sure. I mean, she talked about most of the stuff I was going to say.
Sorry.
Yeah. But so we are on Azure and we are on DataStax, both of which are HITRUST and HIPAA compliant. Apart from that, we run a bunch of our own internal models. We use Llama for some use cases. We use SQL Coder for some use cases to do our text-to-SQL stuff. It's a mixture of a bunch of things, and all of those are highly configurable. Now, the upside of not having to depend on an OpenAI is you can do the same stuff for a lot cheaper, a lot faster, and you get a lot more throughput out of it. So access to GPU compute right now, I think, is easier than ever. So get your own GPU compute, run Kubernetes on it, and just scale it out, scale it down when you don't have a need for it. That's what we do, and it's given us a lot of elastic throughput. It's also made it a lot cheaper for us to run.
Great. Sam, how about you?
Yeah, I think one of the hardest parts is understanding where your data is. So that's one of the things we mentioned. We actually do use OpenAI, and you can use it through Azure as well and get that BAA. But one of the most difficult pieces is you need to understand that threat model front to back. You need to understand where your data is at all times. And obviously HIPAA is there, but in a lot of ways, right, you need to take all of the same security measures that you have learned over time, making products, making APIs from the beginning. This is no different. It's just one of the ways that AI is unique is that it wants your data, right? Like when you have a normal API or you're using a service, a lot of it is, it's transactional, right? It's just, oh, let me just get this little piece of data, where a lot of the time, working with different companies, they say, here, just give us all your data and we'll take care of it, which I think can be really effective, but you need to find a partner like SkyPoint. You need to find someone and a company you can trust with clear understanding and strategy. And so when Helpvana was actually developing this initially, we ended up doing it ourselves because we've been working on this for a very long time. But I think that's really kind of the hardest part, is that not that I would ever say that other businesses are playing very fast and loose, but you just can't do that in healthcare, right? You need to know, you need to have a solid threat model, and you need to really understand where your data is at every point.
Sam, when we were prepping, I think a couple of days ago, we talked about the danger of making a diagnosis, right? Then you're stepping into a compliance area, and you mentioned a big number. Was it $2 trillion in terms of market value of areas in healthcare you can serve without actually being in the diagnosis arena?
Yeah, absolutely. I think
that's where you're playing, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they hear medicine or think health tech, they really actually think doctors providing services or pharmacists giving medication. If you look at the U.S. healthcare market, it's $4 to $4.5 trillion a year, and by some estimates, more than half of that is the paperwork, is charting, it is all of this enormous bureaucracy, which in a lot of ways is built to help people and support people. I think Medicare and Medicaid are two of those where you really they have a great intention, but they end up with thousands of pages of documentation and just an incredible amount to manage. So I think what AI can do, again, kind of like that, from paper in a filing cabinet to a digital record of that, is this huge leap. AI is going to be able to take literally millions, but at the current solution level, right, you're talking tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of documents, and actually finding that needle in a haystack for you in a way that could literally take, and we actually, again, we're talking with Tabor, take days of work, and now you can just find what you're looking for. Right. It's a really incredible opportunity.
So, and I think something that we touched on when we talked the other day, and you put it into context, was Tabor utilizes something like 5 billion tokens. Yes. And when you think about that, right, I think you were saying that's like 16.5 tons of novels that's ingested into a system. And then the models that we have and how they, communicate with each other, and our overall planner model that then dictates, where the Gen AI goes and how it pulls that information, really just cuts down on so much time. And I think if you just think about Medicare, there's something like $65 billion that is spent on administrative costs just within Medicare. And so I think when you think about Tabor and our North Star, it's like, how do we create efficiencies in the Medicare enrollment process so that we can divert, even if it's 30% of that, $20 billion back into providing actual care to patients and to Americans in the US, is sort of like the moonshot goal.
Absolutely. I think you talk about that with Medicare and how much data it is. You say, well, how long did that take before AI? Mm-hmm. And the answer is no one knew all of it, right? You never actually absorbed all of it. And now I think you can get to that scale where you actually every single year can update to understand what has changed, what's new, and what's going to be helpful for patients.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, I think what the encouraging thing is for entrepreneurs or developers who are in this space, it sounds like there's a huge amount of space to be active without bumping into this this fear of not being up to speed with compliance, right? So it feels like a scary thing, but it sounds like a sector
There's
that's
a lot of
ripe,
room for
ripe for
opportunity.
disruption, right? And
Yeah.
Thyssen from SkyPoint is very eloquent about this, right? In terms of the same breakdown of the market, that there's a huge market to go after around documentation. And you're not in compliance either, right, Leah? So you're able to, right, Tabor
Correct.
is able to
It's
serve
current
these
state,
field
yep.
marketing officers, right, in
Medicare
terms
agents, yeah.
medical agents without
Yeah.
necessarily getting into diagnoses, right?
Absolutely. And I think what's interesting is on one of the slides in the other room, when you looked at the verticals and the sectors that DataStack is working with, you didn't even see healthcare up there, right? So we are so far beyond when it comes to how to use AI and technology in healthcare. And there's just a massive opportunity to improve and create efficiency and just really give back to the people.
Right. Yeah, so I want to go for another 3 minutes, and then we can open up for questions again. I'm sure that there will be some good ones. Is there such a thing as a HIPAA-compliant tech stack? Sandeep, I'm going to look at you, right, because you're probably the closest to this. But Sam or Leah, I know you're a little further away, Leah, but in terms of best practice for HIPAA.
I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all solution here. So as I said, we are on Azure DataStax and LangChain. Any of the big hyperscalers, Azure, AWS, will have HIPAA compliance. Similarly, all big vector databases should have HIPAA compliance. I know DataStax does. Now, orchestration tools, it's up to you to run them. So anything that's in your environment, it will be HIPAA or HITRUST compliant, but you have to get through that certification. So there's no one tech stack that you can use. Just what helps us is because we inherit a lot of the controls from Azure and DataStax, that just makes it a lot easier. So the choice of database, where you're keeping your data, and the choice of your hyperscaler just makes it easier.
Yeah. Sam?
Yeah, I think I agree for sure. And I think part of it is really thinking about what your use case relies on, right? Like HIPAA is not just one standard. It depends on who's looking at the data, what the data is for, how all those pieces interplay. And I think that again is thinking about your use case, thinking about your threat model, thinking about where your data lives. Because if you are, again, following those same standards, this is one of the things that we actually have talked a lot about internally is fine-tuning, this potentially enormous opportunity to make the model better. And depending on your threat model, depending on what you're doing, right, we have seen in papers and PhDs this ability that any information that is fine-tuned can potentially be actually extracted back out of that model as part of the output. Well, if you're building a product that is only going to be used by your staff members, that isn't going to have nefarious users doing it, you theoretically, right, you can make that threat determination. Well, Healthvana is direct to patient. So we made the decision that we do not fine-tune on any PII or PHI, period. Because maybe in the future, that will become clearer. It won't be a gray area anymore. We'll be able to make that decision. But it's one of these things where I think it's finding a provider or getting that internal understanding at your company that you really understand what each of the tools means. What does putting all of your data in RAG mean? What does using all of your data to fine-tune? How do you actually navigate that? And I don't think it really requires a lot of technical understanding or like being a programmer. I think it's just thinking about saying, this information could come back out, right? If the AI was an employee, should they have access to this information? And building out that process in, again, using the best case, looking at the most recent research, and then also, I think, being conservative. This market is huge. There are so many opportunities. There are a lot of startups, I've seen them saying, we're going to diagnose conditions, just take a picture of your arm and we'll tell you what that, it's just, you don't need to go to that edge to find an incredible solution. I think in some ways, right, I don't want to say anything about Tabor, but I think both of our solutions are in some ways a little bit boring, but in a great way, right? We're going to come up with a great solution. It's not about the flash. It's about actually helping people.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sam. Leah, anything to add?
No.
Okay, great. Any questions? Saw that one go up.
So for Sandeep, I know you're talking about using open source models like Llama and so forth. Is there any exploration that you guys have using smaller models and research also towards things like other encryption techniques like FHE and so forth to help protect patient data and also help with your computational costs.
So when I said Llama, we use Llama, the 8 billion parameter model, the smaller one, and we use that in a lot of use cases. It has a decent MMLU score, so it has good instruction following capabilities, and we have a lot of use cases where it just needs to follow instructions. You few shot it, you give it some instructions, and it needs to follow that. So we have a place for a lot of the smaller models. In fact, most of the models that we use, apart from our planning models, are smaller ones. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's about that orchestration that you want a smart model to basically start the process. And then, I mean, this is the one thing I think when we were talking before, because he's not here, I get to do what I want. No, but I think one of the biggest pieces is that what we have found is that smaller, more targeted models are just more effective. There is no one perfect prompt that is going to solve your entire product. It's a whole application. Yeah. You really want to, and a good use case is to actually say, if I was having humans do this, right? If I was going to have them write a blog post, I would have one do the initial writing, one be a proofreader, one looking at it from, potential stakeholder view. Like that kind of walkthrough, again, that's how we use smaller models as well, is we have this direct patient-facing that is our highest priority, our threat model, all these things. We also have a lot of internal AI on the evaluation process. So as we create new versions of our product, we are doing automated testing. Well, you start with using a flagship model and then say, hey, what if we actually grab Llama? What if we do GPT-4o Mini? What if we try these different things? And you actually have something to compare it to directly. And in a lot of cases, we see the small model doing just as well or statistically insignificantly worse and saving 30x the money. So being able to have those use cases, and again, with a strong threat model, you feel comfortable saying, okay, this is not patient-facing, this is something where we can try this out, and then as we feel more comfortable with it, move it into an actual production.
Is there a question there? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you guys for the awesome insights. One question about like HIPAA compliance, because you guys are talking about databases are being HIPAA compliant, and saying that your service is HIPAA compliant. What does it mean? Like, what does it take for you guys to build a HIPAA compliant infrastructure? And do people need to do more things on the application layer to enforce that?
So HIPAA is, as far as I know, is just a regulation. You can't enforce. It's a government regulation. What we do have is HITRUST, which is you need to get audited by a third party, and you need to have certain controls that your organization conforms to, certain controls. So that is what we mean when we say HIPAA compliant. HITRUST is HIPAA, plus it has a few other things, some of the security frameworks that you need to conform to. So a lot of third-party auditors give you or audit you for HITRUST. They give you the controls that you need to measure up to. You need to work on those for some period of time. Then they audit you, and if you are found wanting in some of those, they give you some time to remediate those. And then again, you go for an audit. So it's a yearly thing that us as a company have to go through.
Any other thoughts?
I would just say, I think, HIPAA compliance is not one thing that happens once and you're done. It is a continuous process. And also, very much not a lawyer, but this idea that you do need to be constantly evaluating what you're doing, but also a lot of these things are universally applicable. It's not just AI, right? If you build the entire rest of your product to best standards of HIPAA compliance or the way to follow that, then again, it just comes down to, okay, where specifically is that data related to the AI being stored, being used? How is that process actually happening? That's a much smaller problem to look at. So if you're HIPAA compliant in general, you are most of the way there.
Great. Got time for one more question. We're actually got a little more than 2 minutes. That's wrong. Go ahead.
This is more of a general question in AI field. So with the ease of all these AI and LLM models, a lot of nefarious actors are using it, and especially with the low level of social media literacy across the entire globe. And this is particularly affecting all the democracies across the world. So what are the leaders, for instance, NVIDIA and these kind of companies doing to actually protect democracies? Because there's a lot of fake news all over, especially in social media, which is the most common form of information gathering by people today. Like traditional media is almost destroyed. So yeah, what are huge AI leaders doing?
Yeah, a lot of bad actors out there. You've talked about Azure being a kind of a bedrock and DataStax, some of these providers that are offering some lanes for you on regulation. Are there any other things you can refer to as a group in terms of helpful direction from some of these bigger players that have a lot at stake, right? Google, Microsoft, they're all being looked at closely by antitrust folks. AWS, any other comments there in terms of what or even maybe what government policymakers are also doing, right?
Social media, like it is.
Well, yeah, we saw SB 1047 recently, which was passed by the California State Assembly that I think is yet to be passed by the governor, but setting a standard for California. But in terms of training models, but anything else in terms of comment there by the panel?
I mean, so I think in the other room, Amanda from NVIDIA was talking about how, I mean, AI itself can stop all of this, right? So AI can generate a lot of stuff that's harmful, but then there's AI that can actually stop that. So it can figure out that this is something that was AI generated, it's fake. And we see a lot, I've seen a lot of companies that just deal with making sure if this data is fake or not, if this news is fake or not. And they use a lot of AI. There's a lot of tech out there that can figure out if some portion of text was generated by AI or not, or some image was generated by AI or not. So I don't know what NVIDIA is doing, to be honest, but what I think is AI will probably solve that problem also. We can use, I mean, if there are enough good people, they can use AI to solve that problem.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that AI will ever be able to identify AI consistently. I think that there is some level, though, of if there's some reporting of some event, that the AI could actually check the ground truth instantly and be able to see whether that's actually happening. I would say, I guess my main feedback is in some of the talks we've had with various folks in the government and in the White House and stuff, that it really is a problem that people are aware of. It's something that they're thinking about and something that they're focused about. Where I'm a member of a coalition for health AI, so in health AI, how to develop responsible standards. Obviously, it's not as hot button as social media, but there certainly are aspects of bias and other data coming through that it's a real concern. AI is going to be generating a lot of information that people read over the next year, 5 years, 10 years. It's probably going to end up being the majority of content people consume in not too long. So certainly it's an important question.
Yeah, I think it's a big question for a reason, right? I don't think it has been solved. We had a panel recently, it was in Atlanta, where Microsoft's leader was saying that was one of the biggest unsolved problems, right? Fake information, as was Honeywell and other execs. So it's a big unanswered question. Thank you, panelists.
you.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Great job.